There is visible mold inside an American attack submarine. No mold, not even a single one. This is on a vessel that operates for months at a time without surfacing, carrying over 100 humans who exhale water vapor with every breath, sweat through high-pressure work shifts, cook 3 meals a day, and shower in the limited sanitation facilities. The combined human moisture output inside an American Virginia-class submarine during a standard 90-day patrol is approximately 7,000 gallons of water vapor. Every drop of that has to be controlled somehow. Because the alternative is biological catastrophe in a sealed metal tube 200 feet below the surface of the ocean, mold spores are everywhere in the natural environment. The spores get inside the submarine when the boat is moored at port, when supplies are loaded, when crew members board. Once inside, the spores have nothing but ideal conditions to grow. Constant warmth from the reactor and the human bodies. Constant moisture from human respiration. Constant darkness in most of the structural cavities. Sealed environment that cannot be aired out by opening a window. By any normal expectation of microbial growth, an American attack submarine should be a petri dish on a 150-meter wavelength, but it is not. The boat stays mold-free. The crew stays healthy. Structural systems stay clean. 5 distinct layers of biological defense make this possible. Each layer addresses a specific weakness in the layer before it. Each was developed by the United States Navy in a series of research programs at the Naval Submarine Medical Research Laboratory in Groton, Connecticut, between 1948 and 1972. All 5 layers have been adapted into smaller scale versions that any American homeowner can install for a total cost under $55, with the core component running about $5 in materials. The modern American building industry has spent the last 40 years pretending none of this exists because every sealed building system that prevents mold is a $1,300 mold remediation contract that never gets sold, and a $4,000 HVAC replacement that never gets billed. Welcome back to Forgotten Home Science, where we dig up the engineering, the chemistry, and the practical knowledge the textbooks stopped teaching. Layer 1 is humidity control, and this is where the entire mold prevention strategy lives or dies. Mold spores cannot germinate or grow at relative humidity below about 60%. The exact threshold varies by species. Aspergillus needs about 70% humidity to grow. Penicillium starts at 65. Cladosporium can sometimes grow at 60. Stachybotrys, which is the species most commonly called black mold, needs 90% humidity for active growth, but can survive in dormant form at much lower levels. The Navy figured out by 1948 that if you keep the interior atmosphere of a submarine below 45% relative humidity, no species of mold can actively grow. The submarine humidity control system works in 2 stages. Stage 1 is desiccant adsorption. The boat circulates its interior air through beds of silica gel, which is the same compound you find in those little white packets included with new shoes and consumer electronics. Silica gel is amorphous silicon dioxide with an extremely high internal surface area. Roughly 800 square meters per gram, which means a single gram of the material has the equivalent surface area of about 10,000 sheets of standard letter paper folded into a small white packet. Water molecules in the surrounding air adhere to that surface through a physical process called adsorption, which is different from absorption because the water sticks to the surface rather than soaking into the body of the material. A submarine carries between 200 and 500 kilograms of silica gel in dedicated dehumidification beds, depending on the class of the boat. The beds are regenerated by heating them to roughly 300 degrees Fahrenheit, which drives off the captured water and resets the silica for the next adsorption cycle. The captured water gets condensed and either stored as drinking water reserves or pumped out through specialized waste systems when the boat surfaces. Stage 2 is mechanical chilling. The submarine vac system cools the air to roughly 50 degrees Fahrenheit at the chiller coils, which causes any remaining water vapor to condense out as liquid water. The condensate gets collected in trays beneath the cooling coils and pumped to dedicated storage tanks. Once the cold air leaves the chiller, it gets reheated to about 70 degrees Fahrenheit before distribution into the living spaces. The net result is air that is significantly drier than what entered the chiller, at a comfortable temperature for the crew. The combined humidity control system keeps the submarine interior at a steady 35 to 45% relative humidity, which is the same humidity range as the air inside a museum vault or a high-end semiconductor manufacturing facility. At that humidity level, mold cannot establish anywhere on any surface inside the boat. The control system runs continuously, 24 hours a day, every day of the patrol, for the entire 90-day deployment. That is layer 1 of 5. But humidity control only addresses mold spores already inside the boat. It does nothing about the new spores that come in with every breath of fresh air the submarine draws when it ventilates near the surface. Layer 2 is high-efficiency particulate air filtration, which the Navy abbreviates as HEPA on every technical document and which the rest of the world has been calling HEPA filters since the technology became commercially available in the 1960s. The HEPA filter was developed during the Manhattan Project in the 1940s, originally to filter radioactive particles out of the air at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory and the Hanford site. The filter standard requires removal of at least 99.97% of all airborne particles with a diameter of 0.3 microns or larger. A mold spore is typically between 2 and 5 microns in diameter, which is roughly 10 to 20 times larger than the minimum particle size a HEPA filter can capture. The filtration efficiency for actual mold spores is therefore closer to 99.999%. A submarine HVAC system runs every cubic foot of interior air through banks of HEPA filters approximately every 12 minutes. The filters are arranged in series, with prefilters that catch larger particles before the air reaches the HEPA stage, which extends the working life of the more expensive HEPA elements. The total filter media surface area in a single submarine HVAC train is approximately 2,000 square feet, equivalent to the floor area of a typical American suburban home, all folded into a series of pleated cartridges that take up about the size of a small refrigerator. The Naval Submarine Medical Research Laboratory in Groton ran a longitudinal study between 1965 and 1978 measuring airborne mold spore counts inside operational submarines. The data showed average spore concentrations of less than 2 spores per cubic meter of interior air compared to typical outdoor air, which carries between 500 and 10,000 spores per cubic meter, depending on season and location. The submarine interior was effectively a clean room from the perspective of mold contamination. The filters themselves had to be changed approximately every 90 days, which conveniently lined up with the typical patrol cycle. New filters were installed before each deployment, and the used filters were sent to the laboratory for analysis as part of the ongoing atmospheric quality monitoring program. If a mold spore somehow does make it past the HEPA stage, which happens at a rate of about 1 spore per 1,000 cubic meters of filtered air, the spore enters the dehumidified interior atmosphere where humidity control prevents it from germinating. Layer 1 and Layer 2 together create a redundant system where any single spore that breaches the filtration has nowhere to grow even if it makes contact with the surface. That is Layer 2 of 5. Layer 3 is activated charcoal filtration, which addresses a problem most American homeowners do not realize they have. Mold does not just need humidity and warmth to grow, it also needs food. The food source for indoor mold is almost always volatile organic compounds, abbreviated VOCs, which are released into the air by everything from cleaning products to off-gassing furniture to human skin and breath. VOCs are the invisible chemical residues that accumulate inside any enclosed space where humans live and work. In a normal American home, VOC concentrations are typically 2 to 5 times higher than outdoor air, and in newer construction or recently renovated homes, the concentrations can run 20 to 50 times higher. Inside a submarine, every human activity generates VOCs. Cooking generates carbonyl compounds. Showering releases chlorine byproducts and skin oils. The crew exhales acetone and other ketones from normal metabolism. Cleaning products contribute their own chemical inventory. If those compounds accumulate, they create a chemical buffet that any surviving mold spores can use as energy to break dormancy. The submarine air handling system passes the interior atmosphere through banks of activated charcoal between the HEPA filters and the dehumidification beds. Activated charcoal is carbon that has been heat treated to create an extremely porous internal structure with a surface area of roughly 3,000 square meters per gram. VOCs adsorb to that surface and get pulled out of the air the same way water molecules adsorb to silica gel in layer 1. A single submarine carries between 100 and 200 kilograms of activated charcoal in the air handling trains. The charcoal is regenerated or replaced on the same 90-day cycle as the HEPA filters. The combined effect of HEPA filtration plus activated charcoal absorption gives the submarine interior atmosphere a chemical purity that is genuinely difficult to find anywhere on land outside of pharmaceutical manufacturing cleanrooms. With no humidity for germination, no spores in the air, and no organic food source on the surfaces, mold has nothing to work with. The interior of the submarine remains biologically inert. That is layer 3 of 5. Layer 4 is ultraviolet sterilization, and this is the layer that handles whatever the first 3 missed. Ultraviolet light, at the specific wavelength of 254 nanometers, which is in the UVC portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, damages the DNA and RNA of any microorganism it directly illuminates. The effect happens within about 10 seconds of direct exposure at a distance of 1 inch from a standard UVC lamp. Mold spores exposed to UVC light at sufficient intensity become permanently incapable of germinating or reproducing, which is the microbiology way of saying the spores are dead. The submarine HVAC system includes UVC sterilization chambers downstream of the HEPA filters. Every cubic foot of interior air passes through the UVC field on its way back to the living spaces. The exposure time is typically about 2 seconds, which is shorter than the ideal direct exposure window, but is sufficient to inactivate the small number of spores that might make it through the filtration stages. UVC technology has been used in submarines since the early 1960s. The first formal Navy specification for ultraviolet atmospheric sterilization was issued in 1964. The technology was adapted from the medical industry, where UVC lamps had been used to sterilize hospital operating rooms since the 1940s. Modern UVC lamps draw about 15 watts of electrical power and last between 8,000 and 10,000 operating hours before requiring replacement. A submarine HVAC train carries between 4 and 12 UVC bulbs, depending on the class and configuration. The bulbs are replaced on the same 90-day patrol cycle as the HEPA filters and activated charcoal beds. For surfaces inside the boat that might harbor microbial growth despite the air handling defenses, the Navy uses additional UVC wand devices that crew members can pass over high-risk areas like shower drains, food preparation surfaces, and condensate trays. The wand devices became standard equipment on American submarines after a research program at the Naval Submarine Medical Research Laboratory documented their effectiveness in a series of studies published between 1971 and 1974. 4 layers deep: humidity control, HEPA filtration, activated charcoal, and ultraviolet sterilization. Combined, they create a microbial defense system that no commercial American building has ever matched at scale. Surely nothing could get through all of that. Something does, and it is genuinely disturbing. Now here is the part that should make you put this video down and check your own bathroom. The 4-layer system above handles air. It does not handle water that is already inside the boat in physical liquid form. Specifically, it does not handle the condensate that accumulates in the cooling coil drain pans. The water that drips down the inside of the hull at the temperature transition zones, or the moisture that collects in the bilge spaces beneath the deck plates. Those locations are where every documented case of mold growth inside an American submarine has occurred, despite the 4-layer atmospheric defense system above. A species of mold called Cladosporium and another called Aspergillus niger have both been documented growing in submarine condensate drain pans during long deployments. The growth occurs in the small pools of water that accumulate beneath the chiller coils, where the temperature stays cool, the moisture is constant, and the 4-layer air system above does nothing because the water is contained and out of the airflow path. The Navy's response to this discovery in the early 1970s was Layer 5. Layer 5 is the use of copper and copper alloy surfaces in every location where standing water might accumulate. Copper has known antimicrobial properties going back to ancient Egypt, where copper containers were used to store drinking water as early as 400 years before the Common Era. The chemistry was first formally documented in 1893 by a Swiss botanist named Carl Wilhelm von Nägeli, who named the phenomenon the oligodynamic effect. Copper ions kill microorganisms by puncturing their cell membranes and disrupting their internal chemistry through a process called Fenton reaction generation of reactive oxygen species. The microorganism cannot survive the assault on its membrane and its internal proteins simultaneously. The United States Environmental Protection Agency registered copper as the first solid surface material with certified antimicrobial public health. Claims in 2008. 275 different copper alloys passed the EPA testing protocols, which require demonstration of 99.9% kill rates against specified pathogens within 2 hours of contact. By comparison, stainless steel surfaces, which dominate most American commercial building applications, killed 0% of test pathogens after 28 days of continuous exposure. The Navy started installing copper drain pan inserts, copper bilge pump impellers, and copper alloy plumbing connections in submarines beginning in 1971. The installations have been continuously upgraded across every generation of American submarines since then. Virginia-class boats currently in active service use copper-nickel 9010 alloy throughout the seawater piping systems, copper alloys in all condensate handling components, and copper sheathing in selected hull-to-frame transition zones where condensation is most likely to accumulate. The result is that the few locations where water might pool inside a submarine become locations where the surface itself kills any microbial growth before it can establish. Layer 5 closes the gap that layers 1 through 4 left open. The combined system is essentially mold-proof under normal operating conditions. The total cost of all 5 layers on a per crew member basis is approximately $40,000 per sailor across the operational life of an American submarine, which sounds expensive until you consider that the boat costs $3.5 billion to build and operates for 30-plus years. The mold prevention investment is a tiny fraction of total program cost and prevents the kind of biological problems that would render the boat unusable. That is layer 5 of 5. The good news for American homeowners is that the 5-layer system scales down to residential use, and the residential version costs roughly $5 for the core component if you already own basic household items. The residential version uses the same 5 principles, just at smaller scale and lower precision. For humidity control, you do not need a full submarine dehumidification system. A small consumer dehumidifier from any hardware store, running about $150 to $250, will hold a typical American bedroom or basement at 40% relative humidity. If you want to go cheaper, 12 packets of silica gel desiccant, which you can collect for free over time from packaging in shoes, electronics, and consumer goods, will absorb significant moisture in a closed closet or small bathroom. The truly minimal version uses calcium chloride moisture absorbers like the ones sold under the DampRid brand, which run about $5 per container at any grocery store and absorb roughly 8 ounces of moisture per month from the surrounding air. For HEPA filtration, a standard MERV 13 rated filter installed in your existing HVAC return air duct catches over 95% of airborne mold spores. The filters run between $15 and $25 each, and they need replacement every 90 days, which means about $100 annually for a typical American home. A standalone HEPA air purifier for individual rooms runs between $50 and $300 depending on capacity. For activated charcoal, the same air purifier units typically include a carbon filter stage that handles VOCs. If you want to add carbon adsorption to your existing HVAC system without replacing the whole filter assembly, you can install a thin layer carbon filter on the return air duct upstream of the existing filter for about $10 per 90-day cycle. For UVC sterilization, an in-duct ultraviolet light unit runs between $60 and $200 installed, and the replacement bulbs run about $30 annually. A handheld UVC wand for surface sterilization runs about $25 at most hardware stores. The wand is sufficient for treating bathroom surfaces, kitchen counters, and HVAC condensate drain pans on a weekly basis. For copper antimicrobial surfaces, the easiest application is a piece of copper mesh installed in your HVAC condensate drain pan. A 4-inch by 6-inch piece of copper mesh runs about $5 at any hardware store and lasts essentially forever because copper does not corrode in this application. The mesh kills any microbial growth in the drain pan water through the same oligodynamic effect the Navy uses in submarine plumbing. The minimum complete 5-layer residential mold prevention system costs about $5 for the copper mesh, $10 for a high-quality MERV 13 filter, $5 for a DampRid moisture absorber, $10 for an activated charcoal filter element, and $25 for a UVC wand. Total cost roughly $55 to install, with about $150 annually in replacement consumables. The modern American mold remediation industry generates approximately $1.2 billion in annual revenue. The industry depends entirely on the recurrence model that has come up across other videos in this series. A homeowner discovers mold, panics, pays a remediation company between $1,500 and $5,000 to remove the visible growth, watches the mold come back within 6 months because the underlying moisture conditions were never addressed, and pays the remediation company again. The cycle repeats indefinitely. The 5-layer submarine system, scaled to residential application for $55, breaks the entire revenue model. A home with proper humidity control, HEPA filtration, activated charcoal, UVC sterilization, and copper antimicrobial surfaces does not develop the moisture conditions that mold needs to grow. The system prevents the problem instead of treating it after the fact. No recurring revenue gets generated for any remediation company. No emergency calls. No emergency invoicing. The reason most American homeowners do not know any of this is that the residential building industry, the HVAC industry, and the mold remediation industry all benefit from the current arrangement. The systems engineering knowledge sits in Navy technical manuals that any homeowner can access through Naval Submarine Medical Research Laboratory, publications. The components are available at any hardware store for residential application. The information has been continuously available in the public record for 40 years. The Navy has been protecting submarine crews from mold for almost 70 years using the system I just walked you through. The same 5 principles work in a Brooklyn brownstone, a Phoenix ranch house, a Vermont colonial, and a Florida bungalow. Mold is mold. Mold spores are mold spores. The chemistry of water adsorption onto silica gel does not care about the building it is operating in. The oligodynamic effect of copper ions does not care whether the surface is on an attack submarine or a residential drain pan. If you learned something from this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss videos like this when we post them. I will see you in that one.